Eurobox presents Blue Toes and a Dog, written by Rudy Baron. Blue Toes and a Dog is a wildly imaginative and emotionally resonant collection of poems that dances between the profound and the playful. Infused with whimsical imagery, deep introspection, and bursts of surreal humor, this book reads like a dream one never wants to wake from. Let's welcome the author, who's our special guest today, to give us an insight on his new literary work. Hi, Rudy. Welcome and thank you for being here.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me.
So, many of your poems blend humor with vulnerability, which is very interesting. How do you strike that balance in your writing?
That's a good question. Well, I mean, I try to think of what real life is like, right? Because real life is sort of that balance. It's almost as if, on one hand, it's complicated, it's complex, it can be difficult. But on the other hand, it's almost like it's like a comedy, where you kind of ask yourself, why do these things happen, or imagine alternative events that could be going on, while this other event, while this other event is sort of set in reality, you kind of get this sort of imaginative world that's sort of wrapped around it, that you kind of look at and you use to kind of distort the way we kind of look at the world, forcing us to kind of look at it differently.
All right. Also, if one reads the book, they have the perception that it has a strong visual and musical rhythm. How important is sound and structure to your poetic process?
Well, as far as like the musical tones go, or alliteration or anything like that, I mean, I think it's important because it engages the reader more. I think that, on one hand, again, going back to what I just kind of said, on one hand, we do kind of have reality that we kind of treat it in a linear fashion, right? I don't see the world in a linear fashion. I don't believe that that we think in steps. I think that it's impossible to think that way, that instead we're sort of bombarded with like different images and different sounds. And so what I try to incorporate in my writing is I try to incorporate not just the reality of the words, but also the sounds that kind of surround it, that give it kind of a rhythm, that give it kind of a musical base.
All right. I also know that your daughter co-wrote one of the poems and contributed illustrations. What was it like to create a book that's also a family collaboration?
It was nice. I mean, I'll tell you how that poem came about was when my daughter was 7. In school she was asked to do certain writing assignments, and she would keep having writer's block. And so this was like a technique that I would use with my students in class, is that I would say, okay, here, I'm going to give you a word, and you have to write for 30 seconds based on that word. And once the 30 seconds is over, I have to take up the very last word that you wrote, and then I have to write for 30 seconds based on that ending, right? So it's sort of, there are these writers, the Ulipists, that they come up with these formulas for writing, right? And what it does is it kind of like distorts the way you think, or it sort of disrupts the way you normally would attempt the way you think. And so that's kind of what I was trying to do with her, is that there's this belief that when you sit down to write, you have to write, beginning, middle, and end. That's it. So you have to start at some kind of beginning, and that's not necessarily true. There's no reason why you can't start in the middle of something and then always go back install a beginning if you want to. And so I was trying to sort of get her to understand that language is free flowing, that language has no constrictions, that language, it's not expecting you to constantly speak or write in complete sentences, right? So that's where that poem came from. I mean, so what we did after we sort of did this 30-second experiment for a number of pages, we sort of looked at what we had and started pulling out bits and pieces and trying to like convert them into this sort of like not only sticking with what was written, but also sort of like creating this kind of imaginative fantasy way of thinking.
Lovely. Thank you very much, Rudy. Thank you again for your time, first of all, and for giving us an insight on the book. And we wish you best luck with your collection.
Okay, thank you. Thanks for having me.
Rudy Barron crafts a poetic experience that is anything but conventional. This is poetry that doesn't whisper from the bookshelf. It grabs you, dances with you, and makes you laugh while wiping away a tear. Blue Dose and a Dog is not just a collection of poems, it's a conversation with the absurd, the beautiful, and the bittersweet moments that make us human. It is now available in bookstores and digital platforms. It's a publication by Eurobooks.